He was invisible to everyone until she stopped. A woman in a clean blazer, clutching her lunch, bent down and handed half her sandwich to a homeless man on the sidewalk. The crowd stared, whispering. A man in a tailored suit scoffed, "People like him don't need charity, they need to disappear." She didn't respond. She just smiled and walked away. But 7 minutes later, the screech of tires turned every head. A black limo stopped right in front of her. The driver stepped out, then opened the door for someone who would change everything. Have you ever helped someone only to discover the truth was far bigger than you imagined? Tell us in the comments. Before we begin, hit subscribe. It's appreciated. It was a warm Friday afternoon in downtown Chicago. The sidewalks buzzed with lunch hour chatter, the smell of roasted coffee and car exhaust blending in the air. Emily walked with purpose. Her canvas tote brushing against her side, a half-eaten turkey sandwich wrapped neatly in foil. She worked as a junior designer at a marketing firm just a few blocks away, a job she'd fought hard to get, a dream she was still learning to believe in. She wasn't rich, not even close. Rent took most of her paycheck, and the rest went to student loans. But despite her own struggles, Emily had a quiet habit. She always carried extra food. Sometimes fruit, sometimes snacks, sometimes half her lunch, just in case she crossed paths with someone who needed it more. It wasn't about pity, it was about dignity. That afternoon, as she left the cafe, she noticed him again. The same man who sat by the bus stop every day. His clothes were worn, his hands cracked, his face hidden beneath a faded cap. Most people passed him like he was part of the concrete, but something about his stillness drew her attention. She hesitated, glanced at the sandwich, then crossed the street. She didn't say much. Just a gentle, "Hey," as she offered half of what she had. The man looked up, his eyes tired but kind. He nodded in thanks. No words exchanged. Simple. Human. Across the street, a group of office workers laughed, one of them shaking his head in disbelief. "Some people waste their kindness," he muttered. Emily heard it but kept walking. What she didn't know was that this small act, this tiny, quiet choice to see someone, was about to place her in the middle of a moment that would shake everyone watching. If you were in Emily's place, would you have stopped too? What would you have done? The city was loud, alive, and indifferent. Emily blended into the crowd again, her thoughts already drifting back to work deadlines and emails. But behind her, the man she'd fed, his name was Thomas, sat motionless, clutching the sandwich like it was something sacred. For him, it wasn't just food. It was proof that someone still saw him. Minutes passed. Then, out of nowhere, a sleek black limousine turned the corner and slowed near the curb. The driver scanned the sidewalk, searching for someone. People began to stare. The contrast was jarring, a polished luxury car against the grit of the street, reflecting the sunlight like a mirror dividing two worlds. Thomas didn't move. He'd seen enough cars to know they never stopped for him. But this one did. The tinted window rolled down halfway, revealing a face Emily faintly recognized. A man she'd seen on billboards, the CEO of one of the city's biggest real estate companies. The same man whose company had bought up half the neighborhood, forcing dozens of families out. The driver stepped out, scanned the area again, then walked toward the very bench where Thomas sat. Emily, curious now, slowed her steps, pretending to check her phone while watching from across the street. Something about it felt off. The driver stopped in front of Thomas. He said something quietly, almost hesitant. Thomas's head lifted. His eyes widened. Slowly, he stood up. The driver gestured toward the limo. Gasps rippled through the crowd. People began to record on their phones. Emily's heart raced. Who was this man? Why would a billionaire's driver be speaking to someone homeless? She crossed halfway into the street, her pulse quickening as she tried to listen. Then she caught it, just a fragment. The driver's voice. "Sir, it's time, sir?" The word echoed in her head. Thomas looked terrified, but there was something else, a quiet resignation. He nodded, tucked the half sandwich in his pocket, and followed the driver to the limo. The door opened, and for a brief second, Emily saw the man inside, the CEO himself, standing, smiling faintly as if greeting an old friend. The crowd murmured, confused. Some mocked. Others whispered theories. Emily just stood frozen, the world around her fading into background noise. Then came the sound, the click of a camera shutter. A bystander snapped a photo of Emily and Thomas moments before he left. "Crazy story," someone laughed. "A homeless man getting picked up by a limo? Must be a stunt, but it wasn't a stunt. It was real." And within minutes, everything would spiral out of control. Because what Emily didn't know yet was that the photo would hit social media before she even got back to the office. And the story it told, the assumptions it fed, would ignite something far bigger than she ever expected. By the time Emily reached her desk, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Notifications, tags, messages. People she hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions. The photo was everywhere. "Woman shares food with homeless man. Turns out he's a millionaire in disguise." The caption blazed across headlines. But that wasn't the truth. At first, Emily thought it was a harmless mistake. But as hours passed, the tone shifted. Comment sections filled with anger and accusation. She only helped him because she knew who he was. Fake kindness for fame. Strangers dissected her face, her clothes, her race. One post read, "She's white? Of course people praise her for what anyone else would be ignored for." Another said, "If a black woman did this, would it be news?" The narrative had spun out of control. What had been a quiet act of empathy was now a viral war zone of opinions on privilege, performative kindness, and race. Emily tried to explain in a short post, but no one listened. Screens didn't care about truth. They only cared about fire. Meanwhile, the real story, Thomas's story, was buried beneath the noise. The CEO wasn't some long-lost friend or billionaire benefactor. He was Thomas's estranged brother. Years ago, they'd grown up in the same small house on the city's south side. But while one was offered every chance, the other was left behind, trapped by poverty, prejudice, and a system that chose winners by skin tone and zip code. The limo wasn't there for spectacle. It was there for reconciliation. But that truth never trended. Outside Emily's office, a crowd had gathered. Some with cameras, others shouting her name, some to praise her, others to tear her down. Inside, she felt smaller with every headline. She hadn't sought fame, but now her face was everywhere. The comments stung most when they came from people of color who saw her as another example of selective sympathy. That night, she sat alone in her apartment, scrolling through the chaos. Then, her phone buzzed again. An unknown number. A text. "This is Thomas. Don't let them twist what you did. You saw me." That's all that mattered. Tears filled her eyes. For the first time that day, she smiled. But just as she began to breathe again, her TV flashed breaking news. Homeless man from viral video found hospitalized after confrontation downtown. Her heart stopped. She grabbed her keys and ran out the door. Would you have gone after him too? Or would you have stayed quiet, afraid of what people might say? Emily rushed through the sterile hospital corridors, her shoes echoing off the tile floors. The world outside had turned his story into a circus, but here, under the harsh white lights, everything was painfully real. She found Thomas lying still, his face bruised, a bandage around his arm. He wasn't famous here. He wasn't a symbol. He was just a man who had been hurt for being seen. The nurse explained what happened. A group of men had recognized him from the viral video and decided to teach him a lesson. They called him a fraud, accused him of faking his situation for attention. The irony was unbearable. People who'd never looked at him twice before had suddenly found the energy to hate him now. Emily sat by his bed, silent. She thought about how a moment of kindness had become twisted by judgment and headlines, how race, class, and bias could take a simple act of humanity and turn it into a battleground. Thomas opened his eyes briefly, managed a weak smile, and whispered, "Don't let this be for nothing." Then he fell back asleep. Days later, he recovered slowly, but Emily was never the same. She left her firm and started a local initiative called Half Sandwich, where people shared meals directly with those in need. No cameras, no posts, just connection. The name spread quietly, one city at a time, The viral photo that once brought her hate eventually resurfaced years later, this time in a documentary about everyday acts of courage. The narrative had changed, not about race or privilege, but about seeing one another beyond labels. Still, the question lingered. Why did it take a viral story for people to care about someone they walked past every day? Maybe it's not about who gives or who receives, but about who chooses to see. Show some love with a like and subscribe to stay inspired.